I think that so people are coming in. Hello, everybody who's joining. Nice. I can't see anybody, but nice to see that people are joining. We'll wait for lots of people to start coming in and then we'll get going. Yeah, so I thought it would be great if we kind of just talked about what narcissistic behavior is and strategies for protecting yourself, rebuilding yourself, how to divorce a narcissist, all of these, very important topics. And then I think a Q&A would be really useful for people, as in, because they can ask for the support that they need and, get instant advice and support from you guys as we start.
Yes.
So I'll give it about a few more minutes and then I'll let people come in. We've got people trickling in. We have a Q&A and we also have the chat. So feel free to say hello in the chat. I can't see anybody, but I can see that people have come in, which is great. So it's fully anonymous to people who are coming in. So I hope that gives everybody peace of mind that anything that they do ask and talk about is completely anonymous and it's a safe space. And really only I'll read out the questions that come in later, and we'll have answers to them safely and from experts, which is the key, really. So Google isn't your advisor, or Instagram, or whatever else it might be.
No, I really love your professional background. It's really cool.
You?
I feel like I need to up my game.
I wish my office really looked that way.
Good. Well, I think we can start, really. Well, we've got, should I wait a couple of minutes? It's only 12:02. Got about 10 people coming in. There were 13, now there are 10 dropping off.
I'd start then.
Yeah, great.
Maybe by the time we do introductions.
Great, perfect. You guys are more experienced than me in this. It's our first one at Pivot, but as I said, I'd love to do more and make this a weekly thing so that people can really, tap into you guys and tap into the expert community that we have of coaches as often as possible, really, with all of their needs and support. So that being said, so should we just initially talk a little bit about what is narcissism, because it's such a buzzword at the moment and it's really thrown around quite a lot, but actually there's like a deep psychological meaning and background towards this word and what people do and how it causes creates very damaging behavior and patterns of behavior and then affects the whole family and affects relationships and everybody in them and everybody around you in your sphere. So Noel, I'd love to hear from you a little bit, if that's okay, about what what are the kind of most common manipulation tactics, and what do we see really in
the divorce process?
Yes, exactly. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about it? I think so. I think we can chat about what what you kind of most commonly see in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I can talk about sort of the common, obviously, depleting of funds, hiding of funds, not going through discovery. Yeah, I can do that. That's not a problem.
Great. So, I mean, obviously in our community, we see so many people who just have, there's a lot of controlling behavior and there's just a lot of abuse around the children, and co-parenting becomes such a difficult thing to manage.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to just talk about, what are the most common things that you see in these relationships?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Should we do it now?
You want to do it now? Are we live? Okay, so if we, I suppose a lot of it kind of depends on the type of narcissist that you're dealing with. So one of the key things that I do with my clients is I tend to profile. So we realize that there's a whole variety of different types of narcissists from, if we think about narcissism, it's it's on a spectrum. Okay, so there are those that have sort of slight traits, sort of hindering, all the way to what we commonly call the most malignant, on the verge of sort of psychopathy. So what I tend to do with my clients is sort of identify the profiling of where they tend to be on this spectrum, and that kind of leads us into the strategy of how we're going to manage this divorce process. But on the whole, there are some sort of generic classic games that they tend to play in the divorce process, and that'll be they won't complete proper disclosure. So if we're thinking about finances, once we get divorced, there's a sort of this channel of this umbrella of the divorce, and then you've got children, and then you've got finances. So if we just pick finances as a start, they won't complete the Form E, or they'll be very protracted or delayed in completing the Form E. They won't give you the statements or the proper disclosure that you need. Which invariably then means if you have instructed solicitors, you are then spending all of your funds repeating sort of the same letter asking for disclosure. And you can sometimes do this for quite a while. It's quite common for narcissists to hide money, but there's a particular type of narcissist that I've coined the leech narcissist that tends to lean on your money. So they really haven't worked that much. They've thought that you're going to be sort of eventually the cash cow. So when it comes to divorce, they have nothing to lose. And they will go all the way to sort of the last phase because they realize they've got no money and you have all the money. So whatever they get is a clever bonus. They will write in very long letters if they are self-represented. Again, the cost to you will be your solicitor reading them. And what they do tend to do is that crossover. The crossover between finances and children. And if you, for instance, haven't moved forward on child matters, they may decide to go for a C100. A C100 is the name of the form in order to ask the court, I need your assistance with child contact arrangements. And the reason they do this is to create that chaos. There's one fundamental element when we think about divorcing a narcissist, the non-narc, as we would call them. We are so emotionally invested, like everything is going on for us, from our children to what does our future look like? Where am I going to live? I have to hold down my job as well as on top of this, my legal fees are increasing. The narcissist is not emotionally involved in any way. They are neither emotionally available nor are they vulnerable. They do have that defense mechanism. NPD is a shame-based personality, but theirs is all derived around control and creating that chaos. So they don't have the same emotional triggers as you do. They will sleep very well at night. You won't. So chaos and a mess, maintaining control, triggering you emotionally is the baseline for all of their strategy in divorce. Yes, we talk about they wanting to win or they're wanting your money, but really more than that, the thing that gives them that satisfying sense of validation, have I triggered you? Am I getting that form of supply, whether it's negative or positive? And do I feel comfortable because you clearly are not coping, whereas I can see that I am? So the emotion is such a strong part of it. But in essence, non-compliance, creating chaos, making the whole process incredibly difficult. And that leans towards post-divorce. I tend to say to my clients that just because you have your financial consent order and your child consent order, that doesn't mean that it's over. On the contrary, there's a whole section of post-divorce abuse that comes into play.
So just for everybody who's just joined, just to let you all know, so Noelle is a divorce coach and a solicitor. So she helps everybody, people, her clients, with the process and how to really, like, she's a specialist in this area. And then obviously, I'm sorry, I'd love to introduce the other coaches now as well, Audrey, Chloe, and Paula, who all have very supportive roles with their clients throughout this process. So maybe if you each want to give our attendees a little bit of a background about what you do, and then we can go into more, and we'll continue with the divorce aspect, and then with the other kind of co-parenting, breaking free, surviving, and really trying to live a peaceful life with this very difficult kind of character in your life. Thank you so much, Noelle, and sorry to put you on the spot.
You're very welcome. I just dived straight in.
We'll go back. We'll definitely come back.
Right.
It's so, that I feel like people who are going through this are really dealing with that very, it's a very manipulative kind of behavior, and that's what they're dealing with every day and trying to decipher it, when really they're also going through trauma and having to deal with bombs from the sideline all the time. So
exactly that. Yeah, I mean, divorce in itself is stressful. But when you're then also dealing with someone that is driven to destroy you, I mean, the emotional chaos associated with that is so overwhelming, which is why it is always so key to make sure you have your support system in place, which isn't just a lawyer, but it's, yes, a divorce coach that specializes, a therapist, everything. You do need to get your team together. I think to some extent people still underestimate that a little bit. You know, divorcing a narcissist is one of the biggest fights of your life, actually.
I also want to add that they have a sense of entitlement, so that the rules don't apply to them.
Oh, never. Yeah.
And obviously they don't have any emotion apart from the emotion they have for themselves. Yeah, so that's really hard to deal with when they want to lead everything and of course win.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You definitely have to create some kind of protective shield, like you said, Noelle, like a team around you, you know, practical tools that you can take with you throughout this process to kind of, you know, set your boundaries, communicate effectively, you know, document everything to ensure that there's a process involved, and you know, you're not crazy, essentially, which is you know, the common thing. You know, they really try to turn things around, so you really question your reality all the time. So I don't know, you know, who might like to just talk a little bit about, you know, strategies for protecting yourself throughout the process, you know, emotionally, mentally, unfortunately, physically sometimes. You know, there's all different kinds of it's actually, you know, deeply manipulative abuse that comes through in this kind of behavior pattern. So I'd love to hear from, you know, maybe Chloe, or if you'd like to
jump in. I was just thinking, as Noelle was talking, you know, these scenarios, they do have a silver lining, is that the other person's game is all about triggering you. And so that in a way gives you power, because you can stop that your behavior that's giving them that hit that they're looking for. And it's incredibly difficult to break that cycle and that pattern of behavior and that dynamic that you have in place. But there's a lot of work that can be done, again, with all sorts of different professionals, including divorce coaches, to help you learn how to set very clear boundaries, learn how to respond to their provocation, to their threats, to whatever it is they're sending your way, and manage your emotions so you're not giving them the satisfaction of getting that reaction out of you. And the hardest thing for a narcissist is to lose that enemy they're fighting. In a lot of cases, they consider that they're victims, so they want you to be an enemy. And if you stop playing along and trying to defend yourself or trying to make them, you know, reason with them, whatever it might be, you're actually taking away their power and their hold on you. So there's a lot that can be done in terms of training yourself to not engage, to not respond. And even if you are still triggered and hurt, not showing them and not giving them that satisfaction. And so it's about little habits, you know, little small changes in everyday life that help you to change your own pattern of behavior and just get out of that dance you're in with them, not give them that, you know, that immediate satisfaction. There's also a lot of tools that you can use that will help. You know, there's co-parenting apps, all sorts of communication tools that allow you to make sure that the conversation is streamlined, that it's happening through a single platform, that it's documented. And so those are things that can be also leveraged to help you through that transition from a practical perspective.
Because it is really easy. I mean, we see it in ourselves. I mean, I've seen it myself. You get kind of in a cycle of behavior, a pattern of behavior, and it's like you really have to break, you know, it's like you're addicted to this behavior pattern, and you really just have to somehow find a way to break from it. And I think also, you know, cutting it off, like you said, using these kind of tools where, you know, there's one email address that you use, you don't check it often. You say, okay, I'm going to check that email like on a Monday or on a Thursday just to talk about children's matters, and that's it. And I'm not going to kind of re-engage into the process. And, you know, just having those practical tools, like you said.
I think it's conserving your energy, isn't it? It's conserving. It's not giving your energy away to that person, not feeding into them. It's actually looking inward at yourself. And, you know, I know from my own personal experience, and some of my clients have said the same, as soon as they receive an email in their inbox, inbox, it's like they've seen a skull and crossbones. So it's actually then to recognize, okay, so why do I feel like this? What's triggering? Usually it's because of the content of that email. And then it's to go through the email and to take out any emotion, because they're going to push the buttons. They know you so well. So they're going to press your Achilles heel. So it's looking at it and saying, yep, that's to trigger me, that's to upset me. And get a highlighter pen and cross that all out. And then you see the salient points, the things that you need to answer, the things that are actually very important.
So we created a tool on one of our tools on the website, on our platform now, on the Pivot platform, is called the Conflict Communicator. And essentially, you put in the email, put in the whatever correspondence is you're having to go through, and it does. I mean, obviously, like other AI tools, but this is specially trained with co-parenting guides, with Kafka's guidelines, government website, all of that, and it literally, clarifies, gives you accurate information, and tells, and gives you the email that you should be writing without that will kind of de-escalate any situation, really, because that is what the narcissist is trying to do, right?
I think Paula touched on a really, really important point. I think when we think about us invariably being triggered, because we are, and I think we have to accept that, and looking within is so important. And I think absolutely acknowledging that we are triggered. I think sometimes we tend to want to push away those feelings. We have to realize that it's highly likely we're still trauma bonded. We certainly have some element of either complex or PTSD. And one of the key things in terms of absolutely, an app and learning how to communicate with the narcissist is also very key, but also the self-help that we can do is realize that our emotions are incredibly high, and to acknowledge that, to not push away those feelings, but rather to accept them, because that's part of your recovery. The more you push away, the more it comes back. It's having to deal and process with that, not making any rash decisions or communications, anything when our emotions are high. Acknowledge that they're high, breathe through it, talk to yourself. Yep, I'm triggered. Yep, I hate this. Yes, my stomach is going. Yes, I can't breathe. I'm worried about the neck. And literally talk to yourself. And then where those emotions are down, and that can be 24 hours, that can be 48 hours, it depends what your timeline is. Remember, the narcissist timeline is not your timeline. They'll tell you they need a response. Unless someone's about to die, there's no urgency here, okay? So you give that time to process, and then you make your decision. But that's really you taking control. That's really you actively implementing your growth and your recovery. Those are the actual things, which then ultimately, when you do use an app or when you do communicate, comes a lot more naturally to you, because you've done the work inside. And that's the bit that you need to get across.
Well, isn't it? It's about responding, not reacting.
React, totally.
Absolutely.
And there is so much of the work you have to do. No one's coming to save you here. That's a really harsh line sometimes that we have to acknowledge. You have to save yourself. It is your internal mechanism that is triggered by this person. And the more you come to realize that they don't have the power that you think they do, it's only the power that you have given them. And once that starts to play out, once you start to predict their pattern of behavior, once you can start to see the game playing, you kind of go, oh, it's actually repeating. Oh, it's the same thing. Oh, this is just a game.
Usually very predictable, aren't they? These kind of
so predictable.
I work a lot in. I support people through negotiations with a difficult ex, and with all those negotiation strategies. There's really only about 2 or 3. They'll try to bully you, or they won't engage, or they'll think that they know everything. So they know exactly how the law works. They don't need to speak to a lawyer. They don't need to speak to a coach. So it's a fairly similar approach in all situations. And then there's some very specific tools you can put in place to force them into the negotiation, to force them to be reasonable, and to kind of push them in a direction that you're setting rather than the one they're trying to dictate. But usually they have a handbook. I don't know where they get it.
I call that identifying your leverage. You need to identify your leverage in that negotiation tactic, and not to force your leverage, but to identify and use it in a very strategic way. And it also really depends on the type of narcissist, because you can have victim, covert, where the nuance is money, so they'll drive, or you can have covert, victim, but actually they're not really fussed about money. It's more about children. That's where identifying exactly the type No one narcissist is the same. And also the manner in which they react or behave with you is not the same, because you are different. The way they interact with you is not the same way they're going to interact with someone else. They are chameleon-like, they modify, but they are predictable. Once they have achieved their pattern with you, based on your weaknesses, your strengths, your vulnerabilities, which they have profiled from the moment they met you, remember, they are streets ahead. They are years ahead. They've been profiling, assessing you since they met you. So they've accumulated this information. You've got a lot of catch-up work to do, which is what the work that I sort of tend to do with my clients. But then that's why a lot of my clients tend to say, why are they so different with the new supply? Because the new supply is different. They've had to change.
Just quick, I want to put, we've had a really interesting question, and I'd love to put it to the group. And, you know, very valid, very interesting. So my set of, from an anonymous attendee, everybody's anonymous also, my set of questions are as follows. Are narcissists, in your view, men or the main breadwinner? In your experience, have there been situations where the wife or female partner is the narcissist in the relationship? This panel is made up of 5 women, and you're talking as a group and to each other, and it sounds like you're providing a view where the man is the narcissist. So,
no.
You know,
no.
I'd love everybody's little.
Yeah. In fact, women, I don't know how the other coaches feel like this, but women are actually sometimes identified as the most lethal of narcissists, because they use their charm, their sexual kind of view. And I have this a lot of my stories on Instagram, and I tend to have to reiterate, I have a lot, my ratio of men and female clients is kind of almost getting very near. And it's very difficult, actually, sadly, still, I think, in our society, for a man to seek guidance and to feel that they have been duped, shall we say, by the female narcissist, because that is there is a lot of it taps into that sort of male masculinity a lot. But no, absolutely not. Narcissists, as we all know, are not born narcissistic, but absolutely women can be and are narcissistic in that. But the manner in which it kind of comes out is a lot more covert, because it's a lot more manipulative. But yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah, they're the femme fatale, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, but I have to be in control. I'm femme fatale. I'm slightly vulnerable, but what I say goes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I hopefully that thing we were saying gave the indication that we were talking only about men, but
No.
I echo what Nawal was saying. Very frequently, clients who are men and whose wives are incredibly narcissistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced that with my clients who are post-divorce. I've had gentlemen come to me post-divorce when they're trying to co-parent with a narcissistic ex-wife, and you can see etched on their faces the strain, because they're struggling to know how to cope. So it's insidious. These people get inside your head, and
That's not gender specific.
And going back to the power, I think because they've got inside the partner's, the survivor's head, they then put that partner, the narcissistic partner, on a bit of a pedestal, and they see them as being that cat, that big cat, or that rat, and they're the little mouse, and they're holding on to every word that person says, but actually it's breaking again that power, isn't it? And going, actually, no, I'm not the little mouse. I'm coming in. I'm the cat here. I'm coming in, and I'm gonna take back some charge in this, and but also I believe in moving forward, becoming the creator. You're not the victim. You want to be victorious. You don't want to turn into the perpetrator either. So, it's becoming the creator. How can you change the pattern? By not engaging in the game. Now, I know, obviously, we're talking about a spectrum of narcissism. So there are those that are, weighed up here, and they're nasty. And you may not be able to do that. But, there are other, forms of narcissism where you can actually start to interact, but become, as I say, the creator. So you're coming up with things that are actually not playing into the game, but suggesting alternatives to what you do. Going back with aggression and feeding into them.
I always say to my clients, you can't row a 2-man boat with just one person, so don't play the game.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, now when I say you can't play tug of war with someone that doesn't pick up the rope.
Yeah,
So
exactly,
similar.
Yeah.
It's just giving them that kind of visualization. I was
Yeah,
like, you can't play a two-man game on your own, so just don't play the game.
Yeah, exactly.
But as we said, I think it's so driven by emotion, isn't it? It's so driven, and understanding our emotion. And as you said, once we get the power of that, we then become victorious and be able to drive and see. Sometimes my clients can't see the power that they have. They don't realize actually that they hold the leverage. I had a client that actually the other parent was in a different country, so had no power in terms of child matters, actually chose not to see them. But every time there was an email, she shook, and I had to remind her. I said, you have the power here. Doesn't even live in the same country. And literally it was, oh my goodness, you're right. Sometimes we do need reminding of that. Yeah. Because having lived with someone so abusive, you lose your own sense. That voice in here that protects us, that leads us, that is instinctive, has so been silenced, and to always revive that takes a lot.
So
literally, it's been years of being told that you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing, you're belittling. So it seeps into your brain.
Well,
I think Audrey hasn't had a chance to talk about.
I know. I really want Audrey to have a chance as well, and to join in. And where we all talk too much, clearly, but basically, I wanted to talk a little bit about strategies and how do you do that? Like, how do you break? Because like you can have, you've got to take the emails off your inbox. So you have to log in, for example, somewhere to a different platform, like a web platform, to, not be triggered and to disengage from the process. You just, what else can we do? What are the other practical tools? And also, we've had a question that I'd love you to answer. I'd love the group to answer about the co-parenting apps and tools for effective communication. So obviously we have My Family Wizard, how effective is that? I don't know, we all have personal experiences with it probably, but I'd love to just talk a little bit about the strategies about protecting ourselves and about surviving this kind of this interaction that we can't really avoid a lot of the time. So
you said a lot already, all of you. Maybe if I could just add about the mental preparation and the visualization. I work a lot on that with my clients because, as you said, now it's very easy. We are going to be triggered, and it's going to be very difficult to get back into a sense of calm and also trusting yourself and your feelings. And I think the main thing is to go back into who you are, into finding your inner you. Who were you before you met that person? And what strengths did you have? What confidence did you have? I'm sure you had a lot more confidence than you have now. So it's about how can you find that confidence back? How can you do that work in parallel of the divorce? Because that's what is going to make you and help you manage those emotions, manage all the triggers. And also, I think it's about building your support network, because when you get triggered by an email, yes, don't reply straight away, as you said, but maybe call a friend and have that step back from the actual situation. Friends can really be helpful, I find, to just make you laugh, make you smile, just bring your tension down, and then you can go back and replying to those emails. And maybe also focus on what you can control and not the other person's behavior, because what you need really, and especially if you have children, is your child's emotional safety. And I think if you bear that in mind, if that's your priority, it's about how can you control, what actions can you do that control, because the other person, you will never control that person. A narcissist, you never control it. And you never maybe expect, some of the behavior, because you lack so much confidence, you lack so much self-esteem, and you think this person is way higher, as you said, Paula, is on a pedestal. So I think it's really about thinking they're not really higher than me. They're not, I'm okay and they're okay. I'm not any lower than them. But that's a really long process, and maybe we can talk later about the recovery tools and tips.
I'm really glad that you brought up the children aspect.
Yeah,
I feel that really can just be such a spanner in the works. You're trying to maintain stability, or putting a routine in place, and you're following all the rules, and then there are things which are happening which are just beyond your control. Like you said, it's been a bank holiday, they might not drop the kids off, and completely disregarding your whatever's happening and whatever you're trying to do. So how do we deal with all of this?
And usually a narcissist is going to use that against you, right? Because you still have to interact with them because of the children. You can't cut them out, and they're going to weaponize that. And that's why you want to make sure that communication with them is on your terms, and you're not getting bombarded with, whatever it is, WhatsApp messages, text messages, emails, etc. And so having a single platform that you select, so we're only going to speak by email unless there's an emergency with regards to the children, or we're only going to speak through our family wizard. You define that single avenue in a way that works for you and allows you to opt in to their messages. So you can, remove any kind of notifications, and you select a time of day or a time of the week where you go in, you're prepared, you got a glass of wine if you need it, and you go in, at a time where you're feeling emotionally ready to receive whatever's in that inbox. And so the apps, to come back to the question, Namrita, is, our family wizard is the most famous, but there's a lot of others. But the beauty of it is that it's all in one place. It's all for our family wizard, it's court admissible. So it gives you, reliable evidence if you needed it. And also it's a bit of like I'm having a little bit of a third person watching you, because things are recorded and the other person's aware that they're recorded. And so they will be more careful with what they say. There will be a trace of everything that's been done, whether it's canceling visitations or changing it all the time, or refusing contact with the children while they're with them, etc. All that will be documented, and that helps put the other person through, in a little bit of pressure, especially with those that like to appear as the wonderful, charming person. That takes away their mask a little bit, and it forces them to behave a little bit better. It's not perfect.
I think if we're thinking about sort of protecting ourselves in terms of the children, I mean, obviously, number one would be getting a consent order. There are still some clients out there that feel that they can navigate without, but I've got a parenting agreement. It's really not worth the paper it's written on. So that, I think, in my terms, sort of strategies, it would certainly be a consent order. And even with a consent order, they might, obviously, for instance, like I was discussing before, bank holiday weekend, saying that they're not returning or they're bringing them late. But within that is actually maintaining your boundary in that game. So if we bring that to light, that situation where I have a consent order, now the parent is saying, I'm not bringing them back. We tend to panic, we worry, are our children coming? And as I advised my client the other week, and I said, okay, just say, well, you're supposed to bring them back on Sunday, but if you're choosing to bring them back on Monday, you're going to have to do that. Now, of course, my client was like, but what if he doesn't or she doesn't, and they're going to be late for school, and why don't they do that? And I sort of said to her, he's calling, he or she, I'm going to say he or she because I obviously don't want to offend anyone that's listening, he or she. And I said, we'll just call their bluff. And the reason I was able to do that with my client is because the dynamics of that relationship was a lot of calling the bluff. They'll just repeat the behavior. So when my client just went, oh, okay, well, that's disappointing. You'll just have to bring them back on Monday then. Lo and behold, a few hours later, well, I can't do that because I need to do it. Because what they were trying to do was trigger my client into doing the drive, into doing something for them. So when you've understood the person that you are playing the game with, because there is a game that is being played here, you can then take the right steps for yourself. And that's also part of protecting yourself. It's not just so much the app or making sure that our communication is very clear. It's understanding who you are having to interact with. And a lot of that analysis can come from where we understand ourselves, then you really understand the person that you are faced up against. Because then you could say, here we are again, another bank holiday, another calling of my bluff. I'm sure they're going to do X. And lo and behold, they do. And they'll do the same with holiday, or they'll do the same with money. It's the same thing, you know? It's a pattern. It's a pattern. You must identify, and this is why the profiling is important. You must identify the pattern. Once you can predict, your stress levels just drop because you go, oh, here it is again, as opposed to the, what am I going to do? And it was really difficult for my client to hold the line there. But when she did, it was like, I can't believe I've done that. That's really big. And I'm like, well, first of all, well done, because that's really hard to hold the boundary. But secondly, can you see how it's all a bit of calling your bluff? Yes.
I think sometimes when you're in the thick of it, Noelle, you can't see it. So that's why it's great to have somebody, like yourself and us as coaches, to actually, we can see it. And
100%.
And I think obviously with clients, you say if they're divorcing and there's no children involved, you can say, like, go no contact. You don't need, once everything's signed and sealed, you really need to be in correspondence with them? No. But it's difficult when you're co-parenting, because if they're young children, you're going to be with that person for a very, very long time. So the one thing we talk about, like grey rock, where you become dull and uninteresting and you're not triggered, you go. But with children, there is something called the yellow rock. So that's where you're actually, polite. So you're emotionless, but you're you engage in thank you, and I will drop them off at this time, or
You just don't engage, right? You don't.
Well, I call that biff. I call that biff.
Yes.
There's an acronym. It's brief, informal, firm, but friendly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just the emotion that's given that, but also learning, as you said, sort of, Paula, learning how to take out the emotion, not responding to the emotional. For instance, narcissists love nothing more than using a shit sandwich. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the sandwich syndrome, which is very, very nice, very, very nice. I'm not paying you money, I'm not bringing them back, I've lost my job, whatever, followed by the, I hope you have a wonderful time. That's a shit sandwich, the bread, and then the horrible delivery in the middle. And when you learn to sort of, again, identify that is the way that they are kind of cooperating with you, you just don't respond to any of those emotional aspects, even though we're driven in here wanting to do that. Short and sweet, factual, one answers, and that's it. And I think it does take a lot of people quite a lot of time to think, is that all I'm saying? Just one sentence? I'm like, well, is there anything more to say?
Nothing else to say. So
but when they've said that, they're going to use it against me. Are they? How? Well, the judge is going to think, are they? Do you think the judge has time to sit there and think, and it's actually, facing those fears with the client, allowing them to say, but I'm worried about this horrible, narrative, as we all know, the narcissist loves to control the narrative, this narrative that is being projected about me, and identifying and saying to my client, no one really cares about the narrative here, it's about what is factual.
So we have a few questions coming in, and I just want to get to them, because there are people who are going through divorce right now, and they need support, essentially, and they really need active tools. And how do we do this? So the question is, I'm currently in a divorce process, and I've recently taken the upper hand by legally bringing the divorce to the UK. This has triggered issues. So Chloe, this would be a great one for you, obviously, with your, specialist, and Audrey, with divorces, expat divorces and things. So I've recently taken the upper hand by legally bringing the divorce to the UK. This has triggered issues around our children and holidays. He now dictates what he wants. This is hard. I don't know how to deal with this type of personality and navigating who gets which dates when. He clearly dictates. He books the flights, etc. What do you do with a dictator? My children are 15 and 16.
Well, the age is
back to Noelle's point around the importance of having a child arrangements order.
But you've got a problem. Your age. The age is a problem. 15 to 16, depending if she's back in the UK, you've got a jurisdiction problem in terms of ages. 15 and 16, children of that age vote with their feet. It's difficult to get a consent order at that age. In which case, I would suggest that you drive the timeline. If the children are with you, or, again, we don't know enough about the scenario, but you're driving it, so you make those dates available and allow them to trigger a potential C100 or a parental. You've got the power here. If they're residing with you, he can book the tickets. It doesn't really matter. It's whether you're kind of like releasing. But I need a sort of a bit more information. But yes,
I'd love
Chloe,
to get a bit more information from
but as you said, sorry, Chloe, I interrupted you. Go ahead, keep finish.
No, that's what I'm saying, is the importance of having very clear rules about how things are going to happen, and to stick to them. So again, boundaries. If that is the agreement, he can book whatever flights he wants. He can do whatever he wants. It doesn't matter. The agreement says that. And so it gives you a bit of protection in terms of having that clarity around what's agreed, what's acceptable. You're not going crazy here. This is what you had agreed. They're the ones asking for a change. And if they want to change, they need to ask for it, and you need to consider it, and you have the option to potentially say no. So it's really about having those boundaries very clearly defined. And I think having a lot of detail is going to be key with somebody who's incredibly difficult like that. So that it's very clear what happens if they change things, what happens if they cancel, what happens if the children are sick. Try to anticipate as many scenarios as possible to make sure that it's very clearly spelled out, and there's no making it up as they go because of what suits them.
Please use our tools for this as well. Like when you're thinking about these different scenarios, put it in, put it into the, if you're not represented, or if you're not, not in a position to get a coach or whatever it might be. But, you've brought the divorce to the UK. So I assume you have got some representation and support around you. But, think of these scenarios and, use the tools at hand as well. So I'll wait for some more information. Oh, so he lives in CH. Yes, I need an agreement. I'm not sure what CH is. China? Switzerland, sorry. Yeah. So we need an agreement.
Yes, Swiss law is really hard. I have a lot of Swiss clients. Swiss law is very, very difficult, especially in the family courts, actually. But if the children are currently in the UK with you, again, I'm surmising, then you actually have the power. And as Chloe was saying, he can book all he likes. If you don't put them on an aeroplane, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to make sure that you think of that would not need to be documented if he lived around the corner. So I would definitely recommend working with a specialist who knows about international divorce and long distance parenting. I've got a template on my website that you can download for a long distance parenting plan that highlights all the things you need to think about and anticipate, with regards to travel and costs and all of that needs to be thought through.
So the fact that you've come to the UK means you've almost won your relocation argument there. So again, there's a lot of backward, history around. Have a lot of clients that relocate not just within the UK, but literally from one side of the earth, planet to the other, but different jurisdictions. So the fact that you're in UK and you've got the children, you've won your relocation argument there already.
Yeah, she's brought it out of the Swiss courts, which is key as well.
Which is really key. So. Yeah. So that is very good. So I think this just a question of you being able to hold your power within what your boundary, whatever has been defined in. And when you do have a Swiss consent order, it can be then translated or implemented in the UK courts. It's just about translating that, and it's about you then observing those boundaries. Remember, the narcissist doesn't really care about what's written down. Rules don't apply to them, but rules must apply to you. Therefore, it's you saying, no, that's not what's in the consent order. They will be available here. But sometimes, clients have difficulty with doing that. They just need a helping hand to sort of push that. And sometimes they don't know that they can do that. Even though I've got a consent order, can I do that? Really? Can I? Yes, absolutely. So yeah.
Yes, I think it's good to have this step back, as you said now, about the power, but also about the vocabulary you use, because when you mentioned he's a dictator, okay, what else can I say, so that I have more power?
Yes,
it's important to reverse the dynamic here, because apparently you have a lot of power. You're in the UK with your children. So why would he be a dictator? Just because he wants some flights booked. So I think it's about the vocabulary you use to define him and to define you that will also bring you, more confidence. And then, of course, you've got all the legal aid that you can have on the side. But I think it's important to have that work done around how you talk about him and about you and about the situation.
I'm going to go to another question, and then I'd love to talk about strategies for recovery and, really trying to survive and thrive this process. I'm going to go to the questions and then talk a little bit about, trying to kind of emotionally survive this process. So in non-amicable divorces and separation, would it not be the case that the controlling party or stronger party would classify as the narcissist? Where is the balance between being a narcissist or not? When a relationship breaks down and there's a stronger character in the relationship and it's not amicable, does it stand to reason that individual would just be classified as a narcissist? I mean,
question. No. And I think the reality is we tend to self-diagnose. It is a medical condition, and I think I saw a statistic that it's only 1% of the population who are
actually diagnosed.
Exactly. But people have traits, and when you're feeling attacked, when you're feeling vulnerable, like in a divorce, those traits can come out and be exacerbated. And very rarely are people the best version of themselves during their divorce. So sometimes it's also, sometimes it's back to the vocabulary, Audrey, not necessarily labeling your ex a narcissist, but just saying they're a very high conflict person, and understanding that means that you're going to have to deal with them in a different way. But it doesn't mean that you have to paint them with that big brush of they've always been like that and they're a terrible person. In this moment, they're really behaving very, very poorly.
So how do you deal with that person in that scenario, right? Like the question, the person who asked the question said, yes, I agree with Audrey, it's so easy to slip under pressure. But how do you not bow to that pressure, really, when you have got this really strong personality? Potentially they're manipulative, they know you in and out, so they know the buttons to press, they know what's going to get under your skin. How do you cope, and what do you do, really?
Well, I think that goes back to what we were saying about accepting that you're going to be triggered and then improving from that. You know, that there's no quick fix. There's no, well, what can we do not to have that? That's the wrong question to ask. It's going to happen irrespective. And going back to the question that someone said, you know, if they're high conflict, are they narcissistic? This is like someone that says, well, they had an affair, they're clearly narcissistic. No, they were just unfaithful. It doesn't make them narcissistic. You know, I've just now on socials, I did this very good test. You know, there are some strong indicators of whether someone is narcissistic. As we all know, lack of accountability, lack of empathy, you know, admiration, desire, supply. There are some good, strong indicators to identify whether they are narcissistic. Or, as Chloe said, they're just not narcissistic, they're just particularly difficult. They like to have a little bit of control, but does that mean they are necessarily, you know, fully diagnosed NPD? And as we said, it's very difficult to do that because narcissists are very good at charming a psychologist. So, you know, they're very good at kind of being able to not be identified as this. But I think I think that's the message, though, isn't there? There are some mechanisms that we put into play, but there isn't one quick fix. I think it's a variety of different techniques that you need to employ, and understanding that you just get better at managing it. Yes. I think that's the key thing.
I think it's important first to sorry, I lost my thought. Yeah, but to have a team around you and to have help, because alone it's impossible, because this pattern was maybe in place for years since you met that person. So how can you break it in a few months or just because of the divorce? I think it's important to be kind to yourself and say, it's very difficult. I'm not going to be able to break this pattern in a few weeks. I'm going to need time and improvement, and every little conversation, every little contact where you have an improvement. And for that, it's good to have someone to help you break the pattern, understand the pattern, help you spot it, and be really aware of what's going on. And then you can really rebuild and find yourself again and be that strong person to implement boundaries and to really be fully, like you said, clear, precise, short in terms of your communication, and not so much triggered. But it takes time. So be kind to yourself, I think. And, you know, the process, you're in the process of healing, but it will take a long time.
And I think
there's no silver
comes
bullet.
down to labeling as well. So we label them with this sticker, they're a narcissist, but is that actually helping you? Because you know that they are extremely difficult, awkward, they're going to do everything to put a spanner in the works. So take away the label and just say they're a very difficult person to deal with. So what am I going to do to be able to deal with them? Because if we keep, you know, if we keep sort of going down that hole of narcissism, we're just going to be on that all the time. Yeah. So I think it's really important to just change that
narrative. Your own narrative, right?
The risk is that then you're taking away all responsibility in changing things, because, well, they're a narcissist.
Yes.
That may very well be true, but you still have a power. Even if they were the most horrible person on the planet, there's still something you can do to avoid getting caught into their web. And I think that's very important, the empowerment message. And I agree with you, Paula.
I think it's also turning it back on yourself. This is the energy. You're giving your energy away to this person all the time, worrying about them, what they're doing. And in that time, you're not actually living your life. You are on hold. So it's actually saying to yourself, right, I'm going to turn it, radically accept yourself, you know, embrace all aspects of who you are. You know, what do I like about myself? What do I like to do? You know, where do I like to go? Who am I? You know, do I like it? What do I don't like about myself? Can I change anything about that? And I think once you turn it around and start looking at you and your children, because when you've got this divorce cloud over you that you're allowing to remain over you, as I say, you're not living your life and your children aren't getting the best of you. So when you start turning it around and say, yeah, I'm not going to let this person play God. I'm not going to let this person rule the rest of my life. I deserve to be happy, and I'm going to, you know, do everything I can to, you know.
Yeah.
I think that this is, you know, when you've lived, it's an abusive pattern of behavior. It's an abusive, it can be a very abusive relationship. You know, how do you come out of that? What are the strategies to rebuild your life, to rebuild your emotions, to kind of, you know, to pull yourself back out of this dark cycle, really, that you're often in, and really just, you know, how do we help people to do this?
I think one of the biggest things people probably struggle with is there's an element of mourning. We mourn the relationship, we mourn the future that we had in our minds, but I think more than that, we go through a mourning of the person that we thought that we were married to or had a relationship with, because there's that horrible realization that actually that person doesn't exist. You know, that fake persona, this person that you fell in love with that you still think is there, or in the process of divorce, you're still clinging on to hopefully that person will come back. There's an element of reasonableness. Surely they are. I saw them at the beginning. And I think we have to be really honest about grieving that first step, letting that go, because the person that you fell in love with doesn't exist. The person that is in front of you now in this process with all the difficulties is who they are. And I think once we let go of that, I think that really leans into the first steps of our recovery, really acknowledging actually that person wasn't real, they weren't there, I didn't waste my time, I was authentic, I was real, I have children from this relationship, it is a learning for me, and then slowly moving on. But I think that has to be our first place, because we have to acknowledge actually what went on. And I think that helps our recovery if we really feed into, right, you were just this fake person to draw me in, and that's
Audrey,
who you are, that's what you do.
I think also,
Audrey, I'd also love to hear, because I know you do a lot of work with your clients on rebuilding and recovery and the strategy. Sorry to cut you off, Paula, but I'd love to hear what
I think what Nawal was saying is very true, and I think also the person is always trying to make sense of what happened. You know, they're always hurting, and then really why, and it won't make any sense. I don't think it will make sense ever. And it's about accepting as well that maybe they won't understand what happened. And
I think also some people feel they're starved of love. They loved that person and they didn't feel that they were loved back in the same way. Their reality, they question their reality of whether it was, you know, all a lie. But it's true that, you know, to reframe that, you were living your truth.
Yeah, and it's about I think that believing that it's not your fault, because often the person is always blaming themselves. Oh, it's my fault. I've got a bad temper, and maybe I didn't do the right thing at the right time, or I wasn't good enough. So it's really understanding that it's not about me. It's not my fault, as you said. Now it's their personality is showing through in the divorce process, their true self. So it's about the healing journey is about, sorry, my voice, it's about finding yourself again. And it's so important to remember, who were you before you met that person? Again, I think it's a question maybe to write down whatever you think of, you know, at that time. And okay, what did you like doing? Do you like meeting friends, going for coffees or the theater or going for a jog? And what did you stop doing since you met that person? And I think that's about how you rebuild yourself and build that trust in yourself. And also trusting your feelings, because I think the cursor, you know, is very wrong place now. You don't trust yourself. You think you're always wrong, and you can't make any decisions because of that. So once the cursor is back to normal and you can really trust yourself, then you can really move on into your life and also have healthy relationships. Because at the moment, you may find healthy relationships very boring. Because with a narcissist, it's always up and down. You've got all these highs, these lows, there's arguments, and it's full of passion. But in the end, it really hurts you. So now it's about placing the cursor again. Say, yeah, maybe meeting a normal person, if I can say normal, could be boring at the first, but really it's about being safe, being with someone who trusts you, who respects you, and that's not boring. So it's about also changing the narrative, as we said before, around the divorce, but around the rebuilding after, and about the person and the people you really meet.
I think that also, Audrey, leans into that sort of ourself is, you know, a common question is, how can I protect myself from ever meeting another narcissist again? Which is a bit about how can I trust again? And I think this is where the work within comes within, because obviously, as we all realize, there was an element of a codependency, an anxious attachment, personality style, a deep empath that led you to someone that could not meet your emotional needs. That is the baseline of a codependent narcissist dance that keeps going on forever. You know, the codependent goes, validate me, I'll give. And the narcissist keeps taking, and round we go. So part of that work, absolutely, Audrey, is I think you need to look within, identify who you are, take the personality test and identify, are you anxious, are you secure, are you avoidant, you know, really understand your understand your behavioral type, which then can help you understand why perhaps you were still within a abusive, toxic relationship, why we held on, why we removed, you know, kind of lost our sense of self, why we put up with bad behavior. And I think if you understand that, if you have that deep understanding for yourself, you can piece the pieces together to understand why you took those steps. That learning of you is so key. That is a massive mechanism to helping us recover. You need to finding yourself again, absolutely, but find out who you really are and be able to say, do you know what? I am anxious attachment. I mean, I can say this about myself. I was totally codependent, severely anxiously attached, which is why you put up with that behavior. And then you understand, right, that's why I didn't leave, put up with it, scared of boundaries. You understand yourself more.
And that also goes back to when you're a child as well.
Oh,
we've had a couple of questions.
Your emotional needs not being met.
Yes. Sorry, we have a couple of questions, and I'm a little conscious of time because we're coming up. So we've got a couple of questions that I really want to get to, and just to say, everybody, I'd love to do these sessions like every week, basically. So, you know, I'm happy to put them on if we have people who want to attend, and it seems like we do. So that's excellent. And you know, so this is pertaining to this question. Accessibility to resources to help and to heal and to get through these types of high conflict narcissistic relationships is not always affordable for all to build a full tribe of support. So what help is there for people who are left in vulnerable situations? So number one, you have to join support groups. You have to find support. You have to find your family. You have to find your friends. You have to find people who understand. So I'm just going to...
And they're free. They don't cost anything.
And they're all free. But you have to ask for help. What I've found is like, really, you can't just... People sometimes don't know, you know, people are busy. You've got to find the support and you've got to, you know, ask for it a lot of the time. We'll be putting on webinars. We have lots of free tools on our website. And I'd love to hear from you all to see, you know, what else can people do really?
You're right about, you know, friends and family. Oh, sorry, Paula. You're right about friends and family. You know, they're free and usually they're keen to help. But they need to know what's happening. I think that's
the narcissist would have isolated you. That's the thing.
Really do.
You know,
in most cases, I do find that the families are quite happy to welcome the person back. You know, once they're ready to move on. But I think it's about being clear about what you need from them. I see a lot of clients who are disappointed by friends and family who aren't supportive in the way they would like them to be, and explaining to them what you need. And it may be that some of your friends are going to be just for fun, and you can tell them, I don't want to talk about my divorce with you. I want to just have a good time and think about other things. And some friends might be there to cheer you on when, you know, you're really struggling. Others might be there to actually help you in practical terms, you know, review correspondence from their lawyer, etc. So it's just telling people what you need from them. And they can become a very engaged team if they know what their position is in that game, where they're playing on this field, and being very clear about what it is that you would like them to do, what is not helpful, and that way they can step up to that plate and really get the give you the support you need.
Thank you. And like I said, free resources. Paula, did you have a couple of suggestions?
I was just saying we've spoken about BIF, which is being brief, informative, firm, and friendly. It's by Bill Eddy. There's a book called BIF by Bill Eddy, and I think that's a really useful tool to have to, you know, to understand how you communicate with narcissistic ex.
Yeah, and I guess just find the information, find support groups.
Instagram. I mean, let's talk about social media. You know, Instagram is an excellent platform to kind of I provide free content every day. Yes. Every day.
A lot of us do, yeah.
On social media, I have on Facebook, I have Instagram, I have free subscription. You get free content straight to your inbox. So they are all available. You know, I talk about all manner of narcissism, divorce, recovery, you know, children separation, co-parenting every single day. I have done for the last sort of 6-7 years. So there is free help out there, but you do have to find it.
And if I may just finish, just add, Nimrita, that I have a podcast as well where it's free, and you have a lot of episodes about all the different topics that you can come up with in a divorce, whether it's before divorce, during, or after. So it's called #divorce, and it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So also it's a free resource, you know.
Yeah, you guys all have excellent content, and really it's about, arming yourself with this information really a lot of the time. One more question. I may have missed this. Any tips on the legal process when it comes to money? I'm about to begin the process. Yeah, I'm about to begin the process. So this is, potentially tips around the divorce process, which you touched on earlier with a narcissist, and especially around money, because that's all control, right, as well.
Yeah.
And
I think this depends on to what extent you had financial transparency in your relationship. I would certainly say just before you trigger, get your ducks in a row. That means finding out about bank accounts, finding out about the mortgage, finding out about your own mortgage capacity, mortgage affordability, savings, your pension, get comfortable with your numbers. Can you take over the mortgage? How much does it cost for you to survive? There's a certain element of prep work before we go down that official formie, questions on the formie, making sure the disclosure is better or complete, actually. And there's obviously mediation is always a first step, but it kind of depends on that person. Mediation isn't suitable if there's been DV, domestic violence, and abuse. You would definitely fall under the exemption underneath that. But there's an element of getting all your ducks in a row first.
Yeah, I think mediation.
There's also you run the risk that your costs are going to be driven by the other person's behavior, and so you're going to be spending to just kind of keep up. And so one way of avoiding that is to, from the very start, build a divorce budget. And that's something I share with my clients. What are the types of professionals you might need? How much do they typically cost? And build that budget for you. And you may vary from the budget, but it gives you a framework of how you, again, reclaiming that power, how you are going to spend your money and where you're going to spend it. And so there will be things that are driven by the other person that you might choose not to opt into, because actually this isn't how I'm budgeting for it. It also means that in your relationship with your solicitor, because that's usually where the biggest costs come, you can also pivot. So if you have a budget of, I don't know, $5,000 to spend on a lawyer, and you're 2 months in and you've already spent 4, it allows you to then say, okay, do I want to become a litigant in person? Or can I continue working with this solicitor, but do much more of the work myself? Or can they leverage one of their juniors to do more of the legwork? Or can we communicate less often? Whatever it is, but it gives you that opportunity to monitor costs and to avoid them getting out of hand and ending up, having spent $500,000 without even realizing it.
And identify things like litigation loans, direct access barristers. You can self-represent, but have a barrister with you to present that hearing, which can be really powerful. Then taking out that middleman as a solicitor. I say this as a solicitor myself. But yeah, those costs can really escalate quite quickly. But as you said, Chloe, one of the key things is managing your relationship with your lawyer. Because you want to feel that you are being protected, but a lot of the time we tend to retreat or not ask for advice because all we keep getting are bills that are escalating the costs. And I work a lot with my clients on managing that particular relationship, because actually I find these days that the ratio of people moving around from solicitor, and that's probably another key thing in terms of finances, finding a robust lawyer. That a lot of the questions I get is, can I have a lawyer that really understands narcissists? They don't really, and that's not the word to use, that's not the label. You just need to say, I'm dealing with someone high conflict. Are you good in high conflict divorce? What is your experience of that? What was your last case of high conflict? What were the experiences that you had? What was the kind of trouble that you had? How did you deal with non-disclosure, high costs? Really interview your solicitor, because changing your solicitor halfway through can be done, but is difficult and is frustrating for you. So do your investigative work when it comes to getting the right solicitor for you. And no, they don't have to be city lawyer, Vardags, because you think it's got a big label, they're going to be great for you. No, actually a really robust boutique firm that has the experience can be just as good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you. We are at time, but I think that this has been really useful, and you know, I've got a couple of messages already from people who said that they found it really helpful and useful and brilliant. So I'd love to do this more often, and we'll keep you all posted. And I hope you, thank you so much for joining, for being panelists, especially with the last minute date change. So thank you so much. Life got in the way. But with appendicitis and things like that of my, so yeah, but you know, thank you so much. It was really great to have you all here and to give your valuable knowledge and expertise to all of the people
Thank
who
you.
and
Thank you.
need the support. So we'll be back, and thank you so much. And thanks everybody for coming. I hope it was very useful. Please do send us feedback. Great to see everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a lovely weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Just had a hand raised, but oh well. Okay. Great. Thank you. I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Thanks both. Bye.